The engine of my beat-up truck, old Betsy, coughed a few times before rattling to life. It was a familiar sound, one that mirrored the state of my bank account, sputtering, unreliable, but somehow just about still going. I was heading to my brother Mark's engagement party. Mark, my golden boy younger brother, who'd always had things a little easier, or maybe he was just better at playing the game. He had a good job, a nice apartment, and now a lovely fiancée named Sarah. I was genuinely happy for him, I truly was. But these family gatherings, they were tough. My Aunt Carol and Uncle Jim, along with their son, my cousin Kevin, would be there. And that meant the usual barrage of questions, thinly veiled criticisms, and outright mockery about my life choices. See, I wasn't exactly rolling in dough. At 32, I lived in a tiny rented room, drove a truck that was older than Kevin, and my main career was a patchwork of odd jobs: carpentry, fixing leaky taps, a bit of landscaping. Anything that paid, really. What they didn't see, or chose to ignore, was what I did with every spare penny and every spare moment. I was building a cabin. My cabin. Deep in the woods on a small plot of land I'd inherited from Grandpa. It was my dream, my sanity. Pulling up to Mark's modern apartment building felt like entering another world. Valet parking. I just chuckled and found a spot down the street, hoping Betsy wouldn't leak too much oil. Inside, the party was in full swing. Laughter, clinking glasses, music. Mark spotted me and rushed over, a huge grin on his face. "Liam, you made it, man." He pulled me into a hug. "Come on, I want you to meet Sarah properly." Sarah was lovely, warm smile, kind eyes. She seemed genuinely pleased to meet me. "Mark talks about you all the time, Liam," she said, her voice soft. "Only good things, I hope," I replied, trying for a casual smile. "Of course," Mark boomed, slinging an arm around her. "This is my big brother, the craftsman, the artist." I felt a flush creep up my neck. Artist was a bit strong. I just liked working with my hands. It wasn't long before Aunt Carol zeroed in on me. She was a woman whose perfume entered the room a good 30 seconds before she did. "Liam, darling," she trilled, air kissing somewhere near my cheek. "Still doing your bits and pieces?" Uncle Jim, a man whose belly seemed to enter the room before his perfume-laden wife, chimed in. "Heard you fix Mrs. Henderson's fence. Good lad. Keeping busy, eh?" He clapped me on the shoulder a little too hard. Then came Kevin. Smug. Successful Kevin, who worked in finance and wore suits that cost more than my monthly rent. "Hey, Liam, still driving that old rust bucket? I saw it parked down the street, thought it was abandoned." He smirked. The familiar knot tightened in my stomach. I tried to keep my voice even. "She still runs, Kevin. Gets me where I need to go." "Yeah, to the hardware store for another bag of nails, right?" He snorted, then turned to a group of his friends, regaling them with some exaggerated tale of my latest failure. I could hear snippets. Lives like a hermit. No ambition. I just wanted to disappear. I grabbed a drink, found a quiet corner, and tried to blend into the wallpaper. Mark was busy, rightfully so, being the host and groom-to-be. Sarah, I noticed, was watching the exchange with Kevin, a small frown on her face. Or maybe I was imagining it. The evening wore on, a slow torture of polite smiles and deflected questions. "So, Liam, any plans to get a real job?" From Uncle Jim. "You know, Liam, there's no shame in asking for help. Kevin could probably find you something in the mailroom." From Aunt Carol, as if that were a grand act of charity. Each comment was a little paper cut, not deadly on its own, but collectively, they made me bleed. They didn't understand. They didn't want to. To them, success was a new car, a big house, a fancy title. My calloused hands, my worn-out jeans, my quiet passion for creating something real, something lasting, that was alien to them. It was easier to mock what they didn't comprehend. I was nursing a lukewarm soda, counting the minutes until I could politely escape, when Sarah approached me. She had a plate with a couple of small cakes. "Thought you might like one," she said, offering me the plate. "They're lemon, Mark's favorite." "Thanks, Sarah," I said, taking one. It felt like an olive branch. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then she said quietly, "Don't let them get to you." I looked at her, surprised. "Sorry?" "Kevin and your aunt and uncle," she clarified, her gaze steady. I heard some of what they were saying. "It's not fair." I shrugged, trying to act like it didn't bother me. "It's just how they are. I'm used to it." But hearing her say it, acknowledging the unfairness, meant something. A tiny spark of warmth ignited in my chest. "Mark told me you're building something," she said, changing the subject. "A cabin?" I nodded a little hesitantly. Most people's eyes glazed over when I mentioned it. "Yeah, up near Miller's Pond. It's a slow process." He said you're doing it all yourself. There was a note of genuine interest in her voice, not the polite disinterest I was accustomed to. Pretty much. From the ground up. Learned a lot from my dad, and the rest from books and, well, YouTube University, I admitted with a small self-deprecating smile. Her eyes lit up. "That's amazing, Liam. Seriously, I'd love to see it sometime if that's okay." I was floored. Someone actually wanted to see my half-finished, perpetually dusty cabin? "Oh, sure. It's nothing fancy. Still a long way to go." "I don't mind not fancy," she said with a smile that reached her eyes. "I like things that are real." The rest of the evening felt a little lighter. Sarah's kindness had been like a shield. When it was time to go, I said my goodbyes. Mark walked me to the door. "Thanks for coming, man. Means a lot." "Wouldn't miss it. Sarah's great, Mark. You got a good one." "I know," he said, his face soft with affection. "Hey, she mentioned wanting to see your cabin. Maybe we could all drive up next weekend, if you're free." "Yeah, that'd be good," I said, a little surprised he'd followed up so quickly. The drive home in Betsy felt different. The engine still sputtered, but my spirits were a little less so. The next week I threw myself into working on the cabin with renewed vigor. I wanted it to look its best, or at least its best for a work in progress. I spent hours sanding the porch railings I'd just installed, swept out the sawdust for the 10th time, even cleared a little extra brush around the perimeter so the view of the trees was better. I was nervous. What if Sarah hated it? What if she saw it and realized Kevin and Aunt Carol were right, that I was just a guy playing in the dirt with no real prospects? Saturday morning arrived clear and crisp. I met Mark and Sarah at a coffee shop in town. Mark was his usual cheerful self. Sarah seemed excited, her eyes bright. "Ready for the grand tour, Liam?" Mark teased. "It's more of a humble viewing," I corrected, feeling that familiar anxiety creep in. The drive up the winding dirt road to my land was bumpy. Betsy handled it like a champ, of course, but Mark's sleek sedan looked a little out of place. Sarah didn't seem to mind the jolts. She was too busy looking out the window at the trees, the dappled sunlight, the occasional deer darting across. "The path. It's so peaceful out here," she murmured, more to herself than to us. Finally, we rounded the last bend, and there it was. My cabin. It wasn't huge. 2 rooms, really, with a wide front porch. The logs were a warm, weathered brown, mostly reclaimed wood I'd painstakingly sourced and treated. The windows were large, designed to let in as much light as possible. The roof was simple, metal, currently glinting in the sun. It was surrounded by tools, stacks of lumber, and the general ordered chaos of a construction site. To me, it was beautiful, every nail driven by my own hand, every board measured and cut with care. But seen through someone else's eyes, Mark whistled. "Wow, Liam, it's really coming along. Last time I was up here, it was just a foundation." I rubbed the back of my neck. "Yeah, been putting in the hours." We got out of the cars. I watched Sarah. She stood for a moment, just taking it in. Her expression was unreadable. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, the moment of judgment. I braced myself for polite disappointment, for the awkward, "Oh, it's nice," that really meant what a dump. She walked slowly towards it, her head tilted. She ran her hand along the rough-hewn porch railing I'd spent so long sanding. She looked up at the way the roofline met the sky, at the sturdy posts supporting the porch. She took a deep breath, as if smelling the pine and the damp earth and the faint scent of sawdust that always clung to the air here. Then she turned to me, her eyes wide, a look of genuine awe on her face. And she said the words that would echo in my mind for a long, long time. "Liam," she said, her voice filled with a kind of wonder. "You built that?" It wasn't a question of disbelief like, "You managed this?" It was a statement of profound appreciation. "You created this incredible thing with your own two hands?" All the air went out of my lungs. I could only nod, suddenly feeling a lump in my throat. This is incredible," she continued, stepping onto the porch. She peered through a window into the main room, where I'd started putting up the interior paneling. "The craftsmanship. Mark, did you see these joints? They're perfect." Mark, to his credit, looked impressed too, but it was Sarah's reaction that hit me. She saw it. She saw the work, the care, the heart I'd poured into this place. She didn't see a broke handyman wasting his time. She saw a builder, a creator. "Come on, I'll show you inside," I managed, my voice a little shaky. I unlocked the simple wooden door, another thing I'd made, and led them in. The inside was still rough, but the bones were good. The smell of fresh-cut pine was strong. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I pointed out the framing for the small kitchen area, the spot where a wood-burning stove would go, the little nook that would be a sleeping loft. Sarah asked a dozen questions. What kind of wood was this? How did I lift those heavy beams? Where did I learn to do that kind of joinery? Her interest was genuine, her enthusiasm infectious. She touched the walls, ran her fingers over the planed surfaces, her eyes shining. Mark watched us, a smile playing on his lips. "Told you he was an artist, Sarah." This time, the word didn't make me flinch. We spent over an hour there. I showed them the plans I'd sketched out on graph paper, the little models I'd made from scraps of wood. I talked about my dad, how he'd taught me the basics, how building this cabin felt like keeping a part of him alive. I even found myself talking about my dreams for the place. A quiet retreat, a place to think, maybe even a place to bring a family of my own. Far-fetched as that seemed right now, Sarah listened, really listened. She didn't offer unsolicited advice or pitying glances. She just absorbed it all, her respect for what I was doing growing with every word. As we were getting ready to leave, she stood on the porch again, looking out at the trees. "It's more than just a cabin, isn't it, Liam?" she said softly. Met her gaze. "Yeah," I said. "It is." The drive back down the mountain was different. Mark was full of questions now, too, seeing the cabin through Sarah's eyes, perhaps for the first time understanding the scale and passion of my project. The mockery from Kevin and Aunt Carol still stung, but it was a dull ache now, not a sharp pain. Sarah's validation had been like a soothing balm. The following weekend was Mark's official engagement dinner, a more formal affair at a restaurant. My stomach did its usual pre-family gathering flips, but this time, there was a small, steady core of something new. Not quite confidence, maybe, but a sense of self-worth that hadn't been there before. We were all seated around a large table. Aunt Carol was, of course, holding court, talking about her recent cruise. Uncle Jim was loudly agreeing with everything she said. Kevin was on his phone, probably checking his stocks, occasionally interjecting with a boast about a deal he'd closed. The conversation inevitably turned to me. "So, Liam," Uncle Jim began, a forkful of steak halfway to his mouth. "Still tinkering away in the woods. Ought to get yourself a proper job, son. That little hobby won't pay the bills." "It's not a hobby, Dad," Mark said, surprisingly firmly. "You should see what he's building. It's incredible." Aunt Carol waved a dismissive hand, her bracelets jangling. "Oh, Mark, you're too kind. Liam, dear, it's sweet you have your projects, but a man needs stability. A pension. You're not getting any younger." Kevin looked up from his phone, a smirk playing on his lips. "Yeah, Liam. What are you going to do, live in your little shack in the woods forever? Hope a squirrel pays you rent?" He chuckled, expecting his parents to join in. Before I could even formulate a response, before the usual wave of shame could wash over me, Sarah spoke. Her voice was calm, clear, and cut through the snide undertones like a well-sharpened chisel. "Actually, Kevin," she said, looking directly at him, "I've seen Liam's little shack, and it's one of the most impressive things I've ever witnessed. He's building a beautiful, sturdy home with his own two hands, from foundation to rooftop. The skill, the dedication, the sheer hard work involved is extraordinary." A stunned silence fell over the table. Aunt Carol's jaw literally dropped. Uncle Jim choked on his steak for a second. Kevin's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of bewildered surprise. Sarah wasn't finished. She turned her warm gaze to me, then back to the others. "He designed it himself. He's using techniques that most people wouldn't even understand, let alone be able to execute. What Liam is doing isn't tinkering. He's creating something of real value, something lasting. And frankly," she added, her voice still calm but with an undeniable edge of steel, "I find it far more admirable than shuffling numbers on a screen." The silence stretched. Kevin's face turned a dull red. Aunt Carol looked like she'd swallowed her expensive perfume. Uncle Jim just stared at his plate. Mark reached out and took Sarah's hand, squeezing it, a proud smile on his face. I felt a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the restaurant's heating. It was the warmth of being seen, of being understood, of being defended. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I didn't feel the need to justify myself to them. Sarah had done it for me, not by attacking them, but by simply stating the truth as she saw it. Aunt Carol eventually recovered, muttering something about different priorities and quickly changing the subject to the wedding plans. But the EIV dynamic had shifted. The casual, cutting remarks aimed at me ceased. Kevin avoided my gaze for the rest of the meal. Later, as the dinner was winding down, Sarah leaned over to me. "Sorry if I overstepped," she said quietly. I couldn't let them talk about you like that." I shook my head, a genuine smile finally breaking through. "Overstepped? Sarah, that was, thank you. You have no idea what that meant. Anyone with eyes can see the passion you have for that cabin, Liam, and the talent. Don't ever let anyone make you feel ashamed of it." From that day on, things changed. Not dramatically, not overnight. Aunt Carol and Uncle Jim didn't suddenly develop a deep appreciation for artisanal log cabins. Kevin didn't ask me for carpentry tips, but their mockery lost its power because I no longer gave it power. Sarah's words, her belief in me, had been a mirror, showing me a reflection of myself that I'd started to doubt. A capable, skilled man pursuing a worthy dream. Mark, too, seemed to see me differently. He started asking more about the cabin, offering to help on weekends, not out of pity, but genuine interest. We spent a few Saturdays working together, him mostly hauling lumber and me teaching him how to use a saw properly. It was good, reconnecting. With my brother in a way we hadn't since we were kids. Sarah became a regular visitor to the cabin site, often bringing coffee and sandwiches. She'd sit on a log, sketching in a notepad, or sometimes she'd ask if she could help with something simple, like sanding a piece of wood or staining a board. She loved the piece of the wood, she said, and she loved watching something beautiful take shape. Her presence was a quiet encouragement, a steady belief that kept my own spirits high, even on days when a measurement was off, or a piece of wood split, or the rain just wouldn't stop. The cabin progressed. Walls went up, a proper floor went in. I installed the wood-burning stove, built shelves, and started on the kitchen cabinets. Every new addition felt like a victory. It was still a slow, arduous process, funded by odd jobs and fueled by passion. But it was my process, my creation. One afternoon, months later, Sarah and I were sitting on the porch. The cabin was nearly finished, just some trim work and a few finishing touches left. The late afternoon sun filtered through the trees, painting everything in gold. "You know," Sarah said, sipping her tea, "when I first heard Mark talk about his broke older brother who tinkers with wood, I didn't know what to expect." I chuckled. "I can imagine. But then I met you," she continued, "and I saw that cabin. And I realized broke is just a temporary state of someone's wallet. It has nothing to do with how rich their spirit is, or how much they have to offer the world. She looked at me. You have so much to offer, Liam. Her words still had the power to make my chest ache, but this time it was a good ache, an ache of gratitude, of being truly seen. That day, I said, my voice a little thick, at the engagement party when you said, "You built that?" It changed. Things for me, Sarah, more than you know. She smiled, that warm, genuine smile that always reached her eyes. You are already changing things, Liam. You just needed someone to point it out. I looked out at the trees, at the cabin that stood as a testament to years of quiet labor and unwavering belief. It wasn't a mansion. It wouldn't make me rich, in the way my aunt and uncle understood wealth. But it was mine. I had built it. And in building it, I had, in many ways, rebuilt myself. The mockery hadn't stopped entirely. Some people never change, but it no longer defined me. What defined me was the solid feel of wood under my hands, the satisfaction of a well-made joint, and the quiet pride of knowing I had created something real, something beautiful, something that was entirely my own. And having someone like Sarah, and eventually Mark, see that too, that was a richness beyond measure. Old Betsy still sputtered. My bank account was still lean, but my heart was full, and as I looked at my almost finished cabin, I knew this was just the beginning.